So Lee, I think we can already start. Yeah. Good day, everyone. I am Kathy, your host for today, and on behalf of Rockford Media, it is my pleasure to welcome our sponsors who have helped make this event possible and running today, and of course, it won't be complete without our speakers and thought leaders. We wouldn't also be able to run this if it had not been to all our participant support. And we are very grateful for you being with us today. Before we proceed to the sessions, may I remind everyone to allow Axel Events to access your camera and audio for better user experience during the virtual roundtable sessions. However, kindly mute yourself during the keynote presentation and panel discussion. Please be mindful that there may be delays with the audio, and for optimum user experience, we advise everyone to use Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. So now for the first part of our event, may I introduce to you our keynote presenter, Mr. Lee Dolsen, the Chief Architect for Asia Pacific and Japan from Zscaler. Yeah, Mr. Lee.
All right, thank you everyone. Really appreciate the time today. These are interesting times we live in, obviously, so I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you guys about how to think about digital transformation and how to think about it in today's times. COVID-19 has really changed how all organizations are really thinking about work, and it's basically we're looking at a situation where for a lot of organizations remote work is becoming maybe the rule, and maybe not even for the short term. We're looking at transforming the business, looking at costs. Business continuity takes on a new meaning when everyone's going home, and the way you work with customers and partners, everything shifts dramatically. And it's an opportunity to take a step back and look at where the world has gotten in terms of cloud adoption, the tools that are available. In some ways, COVID wasn't as bad as it could have been, just because the world was a long way along the journey for digital transformation. But we are seeing now organizations really accelerate and look at, how do I refactor my business? Where can I take out costs? Even things like rental and leases. If you're looking at more and more users working from home, how do you restructure that? How do you restructure your network around that? And we are seeing a lot of organizations take this as an opportunity to really refactor their business. Look at a lot of things that were in the old world, they would slow things down, and just pushing past those and redesigning how they go about getting users to applications and interacting with their customers and their business partners. So the legacy way of doing things, you can see that circle in the middle is, we had this idea of, we had a data center where originally our applications were hosted. More and more those applications are moving into the cloud. We built a network around that data center where users, if they were on the network, had connectivity to there. And there was remote access infrastructure, but it was built more for occasional use, like a small percentage of the workforce when they needed to get in. Very few organizations were building remote access infrastructure for 100% of the workforce. And so we've seen a variety of challenges with organizations just trying to figure out, how do I balance security with the VPN infrastructure that I have? How do I scale that up? Are there better ways of doing things? And of course, the initial emergencies when everyone went home, we're well past that, but we're still, a lot of organizations I talk to are not in a state where they're happy, right? They're looking actively for, what are the solutions to get the best user experience, but also reduce risk. Because, likewise, a lot of organizations aren't using VPN for 100% of your traffic to be going back through, and then back through your internet security infrastructure that you might have there, right? If you're a financial services company, maybe you're forcing the users back through this infrastructure, but then that's causing a really terrible user experience. The flip side for a lot of enterprises is they're saying, well, I'll just use this VPN infrastructure for my internal applications, but I'll just rely on whatever type of endpoint security I have, and I'll lose all the security invest you have in the data center because these users are directly accessing internet and cloud applications from their home networks. And of course, we're never going to be able to build security within every user's home network. That's not an option. So we have to look at other alternatives. So if we think through the alternatives, of course, one approach is to kind of do what we're comfortable with from an industry. We're comfortable with the firewalls and the security point products that we put in our gateways in the data center. We could actually replicate that up in Azure or AWS, and many security vendors have virtualized versions I can run up there. But you're really shifting the problem, right? You're then just moving the problem from your physical DC to a virtual DC, adding lots of overhead, increasing your attack surface. User experience is still not ideal because that's not what these compute environments were built for. They were built for hosting services around compute that's providing applications. They're not designed to be a transit for the rest of the internet. Well, they can be used in that way. It's just not ideal in many different ways, from a cost, from a security, user experience. So, another approach, which is Zscaler's approach, which is why you see this logo, but the basic concept here is we're using a zero trust exchange. SASE is another word that gets talked about by analysts. But the basic idea is you have an exchange that's also in the cloud that has good connectivity across all the different potential clouds, that's designed to do security natively. And so no matter where the users are, if they're at home, even when they come back in the data center, it's designed to take all of the different types of security functions that you would have had in-house and replicate those in a cloud environment where you can really seamlessly manage that and give the users a very good experience. This is SLA-backed performance, uptime, etc., and completely eliminate your attack surface because you don't need to advertise your applications yourselves. You're going to route all connectivity through your applications via the cloud. And so Zscaler, we break this exchange into two different parts. The first part of the exchange is the outbound part. So, a lot of organizations, again, shifting to work from home, suddenly you lost the security that was happening in your data center because you have split VPN tunnels, or you've got a methodology that allows users direct access. In that case, then you're relying just on your very last line of defense, which is your endpoint software. Or the flip side is maybe you're forcing everyone back via VPN and you have a poor user experience as you try to route back through that stack. So Zscaler Internet Access is really around replacing all the different point products that do the internet security. So the firewalls, the URL, access control, et cetera. That's all Zscaler Internet Access. But then when it's getting users to your internal apps, we want to do things in a very different way that eliminates the need to scale out VPNs and go on, complex segmentation projects with your applications. We can use the cloud to provide zero trust access to your applications. And so that's Zscaler Private Access. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into both of these. So if we talk about the idea with this is shifting though, is this idea is we're able to then accelerate digital transformation, move from this castle and moat model where, if the user is on the network, we trust the user, right? Instead of bringing the user into a network that you trust, we move to a zero trust exchange where, I use the identity of the user, I use multi-factor authentication, I can use things like device context to ensure that the user is who they say they are and that the device meets whatever criteria you need, and that they then get access to the individual applications they need across this exchange. And so this, often when we get started with customers, we're really focused on employees, but if you look around all these different types of scenarios around here and all the different kinds of interconnectivity, you've got many types of use cases where you've got workloads or users or business partners or customers connecting to other services which are on the internet. So we want this exchange to always be sitting in the middle regardless of the use case, and that's really what Zscaler is about. So if we talk about the security side of it, this is just an example, and we've got a great blog. You see here the word Threat Labs. You can go Google Threat Labs and look at what some of our research team has shown. But we saw something like a 300,000% increase in attacks focused around COVID-19 because it's, the attackers, the hackers, the various criminal organizations always take advantage of a good crisis. And COVID has been an industry crisis in that it's probably one of the only crises that's truly so global in scale that everyone in the world, regardless of your language, is Googling this, looking for things, getting notifications. And so we've just seen massive amounts of threats coming that are focused on tricking users around various things around COVID. And if you're working from home, maybe your on-prem security would have caught some of those things, but it's very challenging when you're relying, again, on the user's home network, their endpoint software to say, yeah, this is going to catch all the different potential ways the threats are there. So the idea with Zscaler is we're going to be routing all the users' internet traffic up through us. We're going to catch all of those things. We've got cloud effect, AI, machine learning, hundreds of thousands of updates coming a day, hundreds of millions of threats being blocked on a daily basis, which really allows us to provide really comprehensive security. And that endpoint security, which is still a relevant part of your security, but that becomes, again, your last line of defense instead of your first line of defense. So the basic idea of the way this works, this can work both for your roaming users and your at-home users, but as people embark on these transformation journeys and you say, okay, let's create a model where I'm going to figure out how I secure my users at home. If you're picking a best-in-class model for securing your users at home, why would you not have the same model for when users come back to the office eventually? So the idea is this solution doesn't care where the users are. If they're at home or they're physically in the office, we're going to be able to route that traffic up to the Zscaler cloud. So for your managed networks, that's going to be with enforcement and tunneling technologies. But for your roaming users, there's an agent. So again, the user's working at home, we have that agent. So no matter where the users are, no matter what the network is, whether you manage it or not, we get all of the outbound internet traffic up to the Zscaler cloud. And basically, block the bad, protect the good is the basic idea. And to do that, what we're doing is we're moving all of the different security controls you would have had on premise, like your access control, firewall, URL filtering, those kind of things. We move that up into the cloud. We do all of the threat prevention. So we're doing sandboxing, we're doing IPS and advanced threat protections. One really important thing though, is we're doing this with native at scale SSL capability. So even a lot of organizations, when I talk to them today around their on-premise security infrastructure, it's not that common to have the ability to look into SSL. I mean, there's many solutions in the market that can do it, but the practicalities around doing it are often so challenging that many organizations just give up. And the thing is, we do see the vast majority of the threats are delivered today over SSL. The 80 to 90% of the internet for most organizations is encrypted over TLS. So if you're not able to look inside that content, that's a really critical security function you need to look at, whether you look at Zscaler or some other vendor, because that is how all the attacks are delivered today. And if you're not inspecting that content in some way, then the attackers have free ride to your users into your environment. But on top of that, data protection is also really important. It's becoming even more important as the data moves out of your data center again, moves into the cloud. So we need to look at the data users are uploading and where they're uploading it, making sure they're only uploading it to your sanctioned IT, but also using cloud application security broker functions to look at the data that's hosted in the cloud and make sure that it's actually appropriately shared, that private data isn't suddenly publicly shared, and leveraging the cloud technology to look across your workloads, across your configurations to make sure all that's in sync and correct. And of course, we need to get all this data back into wherever you're doing your security monitoring so that your security organization can look at that. And so we also give you unprecedented visibility and the ability to see what your users are up to, what the applications are being used, look at performance across that, regardless of where they are. Again, working from home, working from the office, doesn't matter from a Zscaler perspective. We're going to give you that same level of visibility. So that's Zscaler private access. And so, that's Zscaler internet access. And let me touch on Zscaler private access. So this is, while that was really around getting users to the public SaaS and public internet, the flip side of this is you've got users that are connecting to your internal applications. And historically, they've used VPN to do that. VPN is really part of that castle and moat model I talked to you about. The VPN puts the user on the network and it uses basic IP routing. And the analogy here is using a phone call. So if you're using the castle and moat model, it's just like modern phones. Anyone with any other phone number can call any other phone. And so, yeah, that's how we get spam callers and calls we don't want, because if you have the phone number, you can make a call. And so IP works the same way. If you have the IP address and we're under that network-based trust model, any endpoint can talk to any other endpoint. Really what we want, though, is we want inherent security in who can talk to what. And if you actually rewind phones to the early days of phones, when they were really new technology, this is one of the better analogies we came up with for how this technology works. Instead of allowing any endpoint to talk to any other endpoint, in the early days of phones, there was a switchboard operator. There was a switchboard operator because there had to be, because of the way phones worked. But that switchboard operator is also checking your contract. So if a caller picked up the phone, they'd be picking up some kind of party line, talk to the operator and say, hey, I need to talk to so-and-so. And that operator, switchboard operator, would look at your contract and say, can you make this call? And then they would literally, if the answer was yes, they would literally plug two wires together to connect the user to the calling party. And so that's the idea that we're taking with Zero Trust. And we're doing this, we're just fast forwarding this into what this could look like in a cloud world, where I can automate this using APIs and multi-factor authentication, et cetera. And in here we have the agent that's sitting on the endpoint, and the user requests access to the app. We validate the identity of that user, who they are, if they have access to that application. And if the answer is yes, then we grant them access to the app. And we're, again, stitching two different internet connections together. So instead of allowing the user to talk directly to the app, we have one connection from the data center connecting to the Zscaler cloud, another connection from the user connecting to the Zscaler cloud. User never actually gets access to the network. We can drill in a little deeper on how this works. But the basic idea with this is, doesn't matter where your apps are hosted. They can be hosted in your physical data center. They could be hosted in Azure. It could be an OT scenario. It could be, one of our great reference customers is Man Diesel, and they monitor the engines in the ships that we see in the Straits and all around here in Singapore and Indonesia. So it can be any sort of application hosted anywhere. We put this connector there. No matter where the application is hosted, we're going to use this user-based access without giving them network access. So this is the concept of Zero Trust. So this is the opposite of VPN. This is a user to app level access control. So we don't need traditional firewall. We don't need DNS. It's doing things like global load balancing. It's giving ways to access this via third parties. Lots of different use cases that this can address, which we won't have time to drill into today. But a lot of different ways this technology can help users get to your applications without ever giving them traditional VPN and network access. And so a little bit more detail on how it works. The basic idea here, the user is going to be authenticating with your identity, your IDP. This will be SAML, it might be Azure, it might be ADFS, could be Okta, many different IDPs. We're going to authenticate the user against your IDP. In this case, in this idea, we're seeing Microsoft as the IDP, user gets authenticated, and they attempt to access that app. They're connecting to the Zscaler cloud, and they ask the cloud, hey, this is who I am. I've been authenticated via the IDP. It did multi-factor, conditional access, whatever you want to use on that IDP. Then if the cloud checks that user's identity, their policy, and says, okay, this user's allowed to access the application, and then where is that application hosted? You'll see these little blue plug icons. We call these connectors, but this is a component of the Zscaler cloud that actually sits in the same network environment as your servers. That will then phone out to the cloud as well. So it's making an outbound connection to the cloud. It's two-way. It's mutually authenticated, so no chance of a man in the middle, as is the client. And we're stitching those connections together to allow that user seamless access to your application without ever putting them on the network. And so those are the concepts that Zscaler implements. And we've been doing this for a long time now. It's been an exciting journey with Zscaler doing this. A lot of the Fortune 2000 are using Zscaler. We see over 100 billion transactions a day. So we'd be very happy to dig in with any of you as follow-ups, and we've got some time for questions. So I think I'm ending just with 10 minutes left, and let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think Lee, for guys, if you don't have any questions, Mr. Lee, maybe we can wrap up your presentation. And then if you have any questions for Zscaler's presentations, just don't hesitate to visit their sponsor booth. Yeah, Mr. Lee.
All right. Thank you all. Yeah, really enjoyable talking with you all, and thanks for giving me a chance to share this with you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that great presentation, Lee. And participants, you may now proceed to your selected roundtable sessions. May I remind everyone to allow Axel Events to access your camera and then your audio. If you haven't registered yet to the sessions you have chosen, as seen on your personalized agenda, you may click the register button on the side of the session details at the event dashboard session. If you have already registered, just click the join button. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee, and then see you virtually. Yeah.
All
See
right.
you in
Thank
the
you,
next
Kathy.
session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.